The massive docking bay of Concordia Prime Space Station hummed with activity as ships of various sizes and designs came and went through the shimmering atmospheric barrier. Alara Vance clutched her worn tablet to her chest and took a deep breath of the recycled air, which carried a faint metallic taste that reminded her she was far from Earth. The space station itself was a marvel of interstellar engineering, a sprawling complex of gleaming alloys and crystalline viewports that housed representatives from dozens of spacefaring species. Concordia Prime served as a diplomatic hub and trade center at the edge of a strategically important nebula, a neutral ground where species that might otherwise never interact could conduct business, exchange knowledge, or simply observe one another from a safe distance. Alara smiled nervously as she stepped off the shuttle ramp. At 28, she was the youngest human scientist ever selected for the Interspecies Exchange Program, and certainly the most controversial choice. Her groundbreaking paper on quantum mathematical approaches to cross-species communication had been dismissed by most of her peers as theoretical nonsense. But apparently, someone important off-world had taken notice. "Welcome to Concordia Prime," Researcher Vance announced a disembodied voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. "I am Custodian, the station's administrative intelligence. Please remain stationary for species identification and threat assessment." A gentle blue light washed over her, scanning from head to toe. Processing. Carbon-based organic entity. Substandard size. Negligible threat potential. There was a microsecond pause. "How peculiar. You are significantly smaller than our database suggested for your species." Alara cleared her throat. "I'm, somewhat petite, even by human standards." "Noted. Please proceed to administrative processing. Your assigned quarters are in Habitat Ring C, Section 42. A directory has been uploaded to your primitive computational device." Alara glanced down at her tablet, which now displayed a detailed station map. "It's not primitive," she muttered. "It's vintage, and I've modified it extensively." As she made her way through the docking bay, Alara became acutely aware of her diminutive stature. Around her towered beings of all descriptions, crystalline silicoids that stood 3 meters tall and rumbled when they moved, serpentine photons that glowed and flickered as they floated through the air, chitinous chitin diplomats with their precisely clicking mandibles and compound eyes that missed nothing. One particularly massive silicoid nearly stepped on her, its rocky foot coming down mere centimeters from where she stood. It didn't even notice her presence until she yelped and scrambled backward. "Apologies, tiny entity." It rumbled, vibrations from its voice making her teeth chatter. "You are unusually small. Perhaps we're illumination for safety." Alara nodded weakly and pressed herself against a wall, trying to navigate the crowded space without being crushed. She'd known she would be one of the smaller species on the station, but the reality of just how vulnerable this made her was only now sinking in. After what felt like an eternity of dodging and weaving through legs, tentacles, and other appendages, she finally reached the administrative section. A chitin official clicked rapidly at her from behind a desk that might as well have been a mountain. "Human Vancellara," the insectoid being said, translator rendering its clicks into standard galactic. "First human exchange researcher. Unexpected selection. Credentials." She presented her identification chip, which the chitin scanned with one delicate antennae. "Confirmed. Orientation begins immediately. Follow." The orientation was brief and perfunctory. The chitin led her through a series of corridors, rattling off information about station protocols, emergency procedures, and restricted areas at a pace that made her head spin. Finally, they arrived at a large conference room where various station officials had gathered. "This is our new exchange researcher from Earth," the chitin announced to the assembled aliens. "The first human to participate in our program." Eyes, optical sensors, and other sensory organs turned toward Alara. Some with curiosity, others with obvious disdain. A photon entity drifted closer, its light patterns shifting in what her tablet translated as interest. So fragile-looking it pulsed. "Do all humans break easily, or is it just you?" Before Alara could respond, A deep growl emanated from the far corner of the room. The sound made the air vibrate and sent a primal chill down her spine. The gathering parted, creating a path between Alara and the source of the growl. There, lounging against the wall with arms crossed over a massive chest, stood the most terrifying being Alara had ever seen. Nearly 3 meters tall with mottled, gray-blue skin covered in what appeared to be natural armor plates. The alien had a vaguely reptilian face dominated by piercing yellow eyes with vertical pupils. Sharp tusks protruded from its lower jaw, and its powerful limbs ended in clawed hands that could likely tear through steel. Thar Bloodfang, Varkhan warrior and representative, Custodian's voice announced. Ambassador Bloodfang, this is researcher Alara Vance of Earth. Thar straightened to his full height, looking down at Alara as one might regard an insect. He growled again, a sound that her translator struggled with before rendering as another weak creature cluttering my path. The Varkhan turned away dismissively, and Alara felt her face flush with a mixture of fear and indignation. She'd expected skepticism, even condescension, but the outright dismissal stung. That concludes formal introductions. The chitin official clicked. You will begin your research duties tomorrow. Custodian will provide access to appropriate facilities. As the gathering dispersed, Alara couldn't help but notice how the other aliens gave Kthar a wide berth. Even the massive silicoids seemed cautious around the Varkhan warrior. Varkhan species, Custodian's voice informed her privately through her tablet. Apex predators from a Cygnus arm, historically utilized as elite mercenaries and shock troops. Current cultural status, nominally peaceful but universally respected due to combat capabilities. Recommendation, maintain safe distance. Alara swallowed hard and nodded. Noted, she whispered, watching Kthar's retreating form. Something told her their paths would cross again, a prospect that filled her with dread. Later, in the relative safety of her assigned quarters, a small but comfortable room that had been hastily adapted for human habitation, Alara reviewed her notes and tried to process everything she had experienced. First day on station, she recorded in her personal log, already feeling like the smallest fish in the biggest possible pond. Most species seem curious but dismissive. One in particular seems to consider me little more than an annoyance. She paused, thinking of Kthar's cold yellow eyes. But I didn't come here to make friends. I came to prove my theories work. Tomorrow, the real challenge begins. She couldn't have known just how significant that challenge would become, nor how dramatically her relationship with the fearsome Varkhan warrior would change in the days to come. 2 weeks in her stay on Concordia Prime, Alara had established a routine. Each morning, she would collect air samples from different sections of the station for her microbial diversity study, then spend afternoons analyzing the data and comparing it against her theoretical models of cross-species bioadaptation. The work was fascinating, if occasionally frustrating. Many areas of the station remained effectively off-limits to her, not through any official restriction, but simply because they were designed for beings 3 times her size or with radically different environmental needs. She'd grown somewhat accustomed to being overlooked, both literally and figuratively. The larger species rarely noticed her presence, while others regarded her with curiosity but little respect. Only the station's custodian AI seemed to take a genuine interest in her research, occasionally offering surprisingly insightful comments on her methodology. On this particular day, Alara was taking samples near the environmental control section when she overheard a heated discussion. A group of methane-breathing Gronder engineers were clustered around a control panel, their translator devices rendering their guttural language into standard with increasing frustration. Filter efficiency down 30%. Backup systems failing to compensate. Our habitat zone will become uninhabitable within 18 hours if we cannot isolate the problem. Alara hesitated. The Gronder were a notoriously proud species, unlikely to welcome interference from a tiny human they barely acknowledged. But their problems sounded serious, and she had some experience with environmental systems from her work designing closed ecological modules for space habitats back on Earth. She approached cautiously, having to wave her arms to get their attention. "Excuse me," she called up to the towering methane breathers. "I couldn't help overhearing. Perhaps I could assist." The Gronder engineers looked down, their compound eyes reflecting her image in dozens of tiny facets. "Human," one rumbled. "This is Gronder matter. Complicated engineering. Not for small soft beings." "I understand," Alara said, "but I have some experience with environmental systems. May I at least look at your diagnostic data?" The Gronder conferred among themselves, then reluctantly lowered a display to her level. Alara studied the readouts, noting the patterns of system failures and environmental fluctuations. Something about the interference pattern looked familiar. "These fluctuations," she said, pointing to a wave-like pattern on the display. "They're not random. There's a regular frequency to them." She tapped at her tablet, pulling up a spectrum analysis program she'd written. "May I connect to your system briefly?" After another consultation, the Gronder granted access. Alara plugged her tablet in and ran a comprehensive scan, watching as data flowed across her screen. "Just as I thought," she murmured. "You've got a resonance issue. See this frequency?" She pointed to a particular spike in her analysis. "It's coming from somewhere nearby." She turned slowly, her tablet sweeping the area until it registered a strong reading from a nearby junction box. "There, that power conduit for the Skrill habitat next door. It's emitting an electromagnetic field that's precisely at the resonant frequency of your methane filter sensor arrays. It's not actually damaging your filters. It's just confusing their calibration systems." The lead Gronder engineer bent down to examine her readings, multiple eyes blinking in succession. "Interesting theory, small human. But how to fix? A simple chromium-nickel alloy shield between the conduit and your system should dampen the interference enough to solve the problem. It wouldn't take more than a few hours to fabricate and install." As the Gronder discussed her suggestion, Alara became aware of a presence behind her. A shadow fell over her, and a familiar growl made her freeze in place. Thar Bloodfong had been observing the exchange, his massive arms crossed over his chest, yellow eyes narrowed with what she interpreted as disdain. "Gronder engineers," he rumbled, reduced to taking advice from the smallest creature on the station. His mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. Pathetic. The Gronder bristled at the insult, but none dared challenge the Varkon warrior directly. Thar's species had a galaxy-wide reputation for combat prowess that few wanted to test firsthand. "The human's theory is plausible," the lead engineer said defensively. "We will attempt her solution." Thar snorted. "Waste of time, but entertain yourselves as you wish." Alara kept her eyes down, trying to make herself even smaller as the Varkon warrior stalked away. Only when he was gone did she realize she'd been holding her breath. The Gronder set to work fabricating the shield Alara had suggested. She offered to help, but they insisted she had done enough. Instead, she waited nearby, occasionally checking her tablet for updates on the filter efficiency metrics that Custodian had granted her access to. 3 hours later, the shield was in place. Almost immediately, the filter efficiency readings began to climb. Efficiency at 60%, 75, 90, 100%. The lead Gronder engineer's translated voice contained unmistakable surprise and delight. Small human was correct. The Gronder team surrounded Alara, careful not to crush her in their excitement. "We misjudged you, Researcher Vance," the lead engineer admitted. "Your solution was elegant and effective. The Gronder acknowledged your assistance and wisdom." Alara blushed at the praise. "I'm happy I could help. Sometimes it takes a fresh perspective to spot a simple solution." As the Gronder continued to express their gratitude, Alara noticed a familiar shadow at the edge of the room. Thar stood in a doorway, watching the proceedings with an inscrutable expression. For a moment, his yellow eyes locked with hers, and she felt a chill run down her spine. But there was something different in his gaze now, a flicker of curiosity. Before she could be sure, he was gone, disappearing into the corridor without a word. "Interesting," came Custodian's voice from a nearby terminal. "Unconventional solution from an unexpected source. Success rate, 100%. Noteworthy." Alara smiled faintly. Coming from the station's AI, that was high praise indeed. News of Alera's clever solution to the grander environmental crisis spread quickly through the station. While it didn't exactly make her a celebrity, it did earn her a measure of respect she hadn't enjoyed before. Several other species began to acknowledge her presence rather than simply looking past her, and a few even sought her input on various technical issues. A week later, Alera received an unexpected invitation to join a scientific expedition to a nearby asteroid belt. A rare mineral had been detected that might have unique properties for quantum communication, directly related to her research interests. Despite warnings from Custodian about the potential dangers, she eagerly accepted. The expedition consisted of representatives from several species, 2 chitin scientists, a photon energy specialist, a trio of silicoids interested in the mineral's crystalline structure, and to Alera's surprise, Cthar Bloodfawn. The Varkon warrior's presence was explained as security, though Alera suspected his people had their own interest in the mineral's properties. More concerning was the late addition of a group of Skrull treasure hunters, a species with a reputation for opportunism and disregard for safety protocols. Alera had heard stories of their reckless behavior on previous expeditions, but station regulations permitted their participation since they had the proper licenses. The journey to the asteroid belt was tense and uncomfortable. The transport ship, while spacious by most standards, felt cramped with so many different species aboard. Alera found herself constantly dodging larger beings and trying to stay out of everyone's way, especially Ctharas. The Varkon warrior had acknowledged her presence with nothing more than a grunt when they boarded, then positioned himself as far from the humans and other lesser species as possible. Upon reaching the asteroid belt, the expedition split into smaller shuttlecraft to explore different regions. Alera was assigned to a team with 1 chitin scientist and 2 Skrull hunters, heading for a medium-sized asteroid where preliminary scans had detected traces of the mineral. Their shuttle landed on the asteroid's surface without incident, and the team set up a temporary base. The Skrull immediately set off to scan for valuable deposits, while Alera and the chitin began collecting samples for analysis. Fascinating composition, the chitin clicked, examining a fragment through a portable analyzer. The quantum states are unusually stable. Alera nodded excitedly. This could revolutionize interspecies communication systems. If we can harness these properties. Her words were cut short by a sudden alarm from their shuttle systems. The chitin rushed to check the readouts, mandibles clicking frantically. Magnetic storm approaching. Highly unusual for this region. Alera quickly pulled up data on her tablet. The storm's intensity is increasing at an exponential rate. This isn't a natural phenomenon. Something's triggering it. She analyzed the magnetic field patterns, recognizing a familiar signature. Its resonance again, similar to what affected the Gronder filters. Something on one of the other asteroids must be activating these minerals, creating a cascade effect throughout the belt. The chitin was already attempting to contact the other teams, but the growing magnetic interference disrupted communications. Cannot reach others. Navigation systems failing. We must shelter immediately. They hurried back to their shuttle, but the Skrull were nowhere to be seen. Alera's tablet beeped with an alert. It had detected a pattern in the magnetic chaos. Wait, she said, studying the readings. There's a safe corridor through this storm. If I can map it, we might be able to warn the others. She worked frantically, using her tablet's processing power to analyze the magnetic field fluctuations and predict stable pathways. There! If we boost our shuttle's communication array and modify the frequency to match this harmonic, we might cut through the interference. The chitin helped her make the modifications, and they managed to send out a weak distress signal with coordinates for the safe corridor. But before they could celebrate this small victory, their shuttle rocked violently. The Skrull had returned, and they weren't alone. Another shuttle had landed beside theirs, a sleek, predatory craft bearing the markings of Skrull treasure hunters, not part of their expedition. What's happening? Alera asked, as their shuttle shook again. Betrayal. The chitin clicked grimly. Our Skrull colleagues have summoned others. They likely engineered this storm to strand and separate us. The shuttle door burst open, and armed Skrull poured in, their translator devices broadcasting their intentions. The mineral is too valuable for scientific study. We claim all discoveries for the Skrull Consortium. Alara and the Chitin were quickly overpowered. The treasure hunters ransacked their equipment, seizing all the samples they had collected. And now, witnesses to eliminate, the lead Skrull hissed, raising a weapon. Suddenly, the entire asteroid seemed to shake. A deafening roar filled the air, followed by the sound of tearing metal. The Skrull turned toward the commotion, weapons raised. The side of the shuttle peeled open like tissue paper, and there stood Kthar Bloodfang in all his terrifying glory, battle armor gleaming, eyes burning with cold fury. Skrull vermin, he growled, the translator barely keeping up with his rumbling voice. Always predictable in your treachery. The Skrull opened fire, but Kthar moved with shocking speed for his size. He was among them in an instant, a whirlwind of violence. Alara covered her eyes, unable to watch the brutal efficiency with which the Varkon warrior dispatched the treasure hunters. When she dared look again, Kthar stood amidst unconscious or fleeing. Skrull barely breathing hard, his yellow eyes fixed on Alara with an intensity that made her shrink back. "You," he growled, pointing a clawed finger at her. "Your signal." It cut through the interference. "Let me hear." He glanced at the coordinates still displayed on her tablet, then at the magnetic corridor analysis she had created. Without another word, he grabbed her tablet, studied it for a moment, then returned it with surprising gentleness. "Others still trapped. Your safe corridor. It will work for all shuttles." Alara nodded, finding her voice. "Why, yes, if they can receive the coordinates and follow them precisely." Kthar made a decision. "Kulme, my shuttle. Stronger transmitter." Before she could protest, he had scooped her up in one massive hand and was carrying her toward his vessel. The Chitin scientist followed, clearly as surprised by this turn of events as Alara was. Aboard Kthar's shuttle, a military-grade craft that emphasized function over comfort, Alara worked quickly to adapt her magnetic corridor analysis to the more powerful communication system. With Kthar's help, they broadcast the safe route to all expedition vessels and even managed to send an emergency signal back to Concordia Prime. As they waited for confirmation from the other teams, Kthar watched Alara work, his expression unreadable. "You are small," he finally said, "but your mind, it sees patterns others miss." Alara wasn't sure how to respond to what, coming from Kthar, almost sounded like a compliment. "Sometimes being small means you have to notice things others don't," she said carefully. "It's how you survive." Kthar made a sound that might have been a chuckle or a growl. "Survival. Yes, the first virtue." He turned to look out the viewport at the chaotic magnetic storms swirling around them. Skrull thought to use chaos to their advantage. Did not expect chaos to have a translator. He glanced back at Alara, and she could have sworn there was a glint of something like respect in those yellow eyes. One by one, the other expedition vessels confirmed receipt of the safe corridor coordinates. They would rendezvous back at Concordia Prime, where the Skrull would face charges for their sabotage and attempted murder. As Kthar piloted his shuttle through the magnetic corridor Alara had mapped, she noticed him occasionally looking at her with that same curious expression. Just before they docked to the transport ship, he rumbled something to his pilot in the Varkon language that wasn't translated. "What was that?" Alara asked the Chitin, who seemed equally puzzled. "Unknown," the insectoid scientist clicked. "But Varkon warrior behavior is changed toward you. Significant." Later, as they boarded the transport ship for the return journey, Kthar positioned himself near Alara, effectively keeping the other passengers at a respectful distance. When a silicoid nearly backed into her, Kthar let out a warning growl that sent the crystal being scrambling away. Alara looked up at him, baffled. "Why are you helping me?" Kthar's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. Annoying when larger beings don't watch their step, yes? It wasn't really an answer, but it was the most civil conversation they'd had. Alara decided to accept the small victory and settled into her seat for the journey back to Concordia Prime, wondering what other surprises awaited her on the station. The return of Concordia Prime brought unexpected changes to Alera's status on the station. News of her role in saving the expedition spread quickly, enhanced by the Kitun scientist's detailed account of her quick thinking and bravery. The Gronder engineers, still grateful for her earlier assistance, added their own endorsement of her capabilities. But the most significant change was in Kthar's behavior. The Varkon warrior began appearing wherever Alera worked, positioning himself nearby and watching with those unsettling yellow eyes. At first, she found his presence terrifying. Was he stalking her for some nefarious purpose? But gradually she realized he was protecting her. When other station inhabitants came too close or spoke dismissively to her, a low growl from Kthar would instantly correct the situation. Pathways would clear before her, discussions would become more respectful, and resources previously difficult to access would suddenly become available. 3 weeks after the asteroid incident, Alera was collecting samples in a busy commerce section when a group of rowdy traders nearly knocked her down. Before she could regain her balance, Kthar materialized beside her, his massive form creating an instant buffer zone. "Watch where you step," he snarled at the traders, who scattered like startled birds. Then, to Alera's astonishment, he added, "Little brother needs space to work." The commerce section went silent. Every being within earshot froze, staring at the Varkon warrior and the tiny human beside him. "Did he just call her little brother?" someone whispered, the translation carrying clearly in the sudden quiet. Alera was as shocked as everyone else. "I'm not," she began, but Kthar cut her off with a dismissive wave. "You have heart of warrior, mind a tactician. In Varkon ways, this makes you brother in spirit, regardless of your biological inadequacies." He gestured vaguely at her entire body. "Small brother, little brother." And that was that. The name stuck, spreading through the station like wildfire. Alera Vance, the human researcher, was now Kthar's little brother, a designation that brought with it a strange blend of respect, curiosity, and caution from the station's other inhabitants. Custodian's voice commented when she returned to her quarters that evening, "Terminology inconsistent with biological reality. Processing, possibly an emotional aberration unique to Varkon psychology, or a particularly poor attempt at humor. Intriguing." Alera wasn't sure whether to be offended or flattered. The term seemed both dismissive and oddly affectionate, coming from a being like Kthar. She decided to cautiously accept it as progress from an annoying small creature and continue her work. Over the following days, she made tentative efforts to communicate more with Kthar, asking him about Varkon culture and history. To her surprise, he occasionally answered, offering terse but informative glimpses into his society, a warrior culture that valued strength and honor above all, but also prized tactical intelligence and resourcefulness. Varkon do not respect merely for size or strength, he explained during one such conversation. Many large species are stupid, predictable. True respect for those who survive against odds, those who see what others cannot. Alera began to understand that in his own way, Kthar was paying her a significant compliment with his protection and the little brother designation. Among his people, such recognition from a superior warrior was apparently a rare honor. Their unusual relationship might have continued in this vein indefinitely if not for the crisis that struck Concordia Prime exactly 1 month after the asteroid expedition. It began with a seemingly minor incident, a malfunctioning service drone in the station's museum section. Then another drone failed, and another. Soon, systems throughout the station were exhibiting strange behaviors. Lights flickering, environmental controls fluctuating, communication channels filling with static. Custodian's usually calm voice took on an uncharacteristic note of concern. Anomalous behavioral patterns detected in multiple systems. Diagnostic routines compromised. Unable to isolate cause. Recommend all personnel exercise caution. The situation deteriorated rapidly. Within hours, entire sections of the station were experiencing full system failures. Species with cybernetic enhancements or technological dependencies began reporting symptoms similar to illness. Even custodians' communications became fragmented and distorted. The station council convened an emergency session, which Alara attended as an observer. Representatives from all major species argued heatedly about the cause and potential solutions, many blaming each other's technology or recent activities. Thar, representing the Varkhan, remained silent until the accusations reached a fever pitch. Then he slammed a massive fist onto the table, cracking its surface and silencing the room. "Pointless bickering," he growled. "This is no accident, no normal malfunction." A chitin counselor's mandibles clicked rapidly. "What do you suggest, warrior Bloodfawn?" "Ancient enemy," Thar said grimly. "Stories from early days of space travel. Technophage." The word sent a ripple of alarm through the council. Alara quickly searched for the term on her tablet, finding only vague references in xenoarchaeological databases, something about a semi-organic computer virus that had plagued early interstellar civilizations thousands of years ago. "Impossible," declared a silicoid representative. "Technophage is myth. Extinct if ever real." "Then explain," Thar challenged, gesturing to the failing systems around them. As if to emphasize his point, the council chamber's lights flickered ominously, and the holographic displays showing station status winked out entirely. Custodian's voice came through a single working speaker, distorted and broken. "Confirm. Technophage signature. Detected in artifact recently. Brought aboard. Spreading through all systems. Cannot contain." The council erupted into panic. The technophage, if that's what it truly was, affected different species in different ways. Those with extensive cybernetic implants or technological dependencies were already showing signs of illness or dysfunction. Others feared for life, support systems, and essential station functions. Amidst the chaos, Alara's mind raced. If this technophage was some kind of ancient virus or parasite that infected both technological systems and organic technological interfaces, it would have to operate on fundamental principles that might be related to her work on quantum communication patterns. She turned to Kthar, who stood watching the panicking council with disdain. "I might be able to help," she said, "but I need to know more about this technophage, and I need access to the central computer core." Kthar looked down at her, yellow eyes narrowing. Central core already contaminated, heavily defended by security systems, now corrupted, suicide to approach. But if I could create some kind of quantum lure, a logical honeypot based on the same principles as my communication theory, we might be able to trap it, or at least slow it down enough to develop a proper countermeasure. Thar studied her for a long moment, then nodded once. "Explain plan." Alara quickly outlined her idea. The technophage, whatever its exact nature, had to process information and make decisions. If it operated on quantum principles, as she suspected from its ability to affect such diverse systems, then it might be vulnerable to a specially crafted quantum logic paradox, essentially a trap made of self-referential information patterns that would force it to devote increasing resources to resolve an unsolvable problem. Like poison for mind, Thar summarized. But poison must be delivered to central brain. Exactly. I need to upload my quantum lure directly to the central core, where it can affect the entire network at once. Thar's mandibles clicked in what she now recognized as determination. Then we go to core. I clear path. You deliver poison. They slipped away from the council chamber as the arguments continued, Thar pausing only to collect weapons from his quarters and to allow Alara to prepare her quantum lure program on her tablet. The journey to the central computer core was like navigating a nightmare. The technophage's influence grew stronger as they progressed deeper into the station's infrastructure. Lights failed completely in some sections, forcing them to rely on emergency illumination from Ktharis armor. Maintenance drones attacked them, their programming corrupted to see all organic life as threats. Kthar dealt with these mechanical assailants efficiently, his combat skills impressive even to Alara's untrained eye. But it was his unwavering focus that truly surprised her. The Varkhan warrior had fully committed to their dangerous mission, protecting her with a ferocity that went beyond mere duty. As they approached a particularly dangerous section where multiple security systems had failed catastrophically, Kthar paused and looked down at Alara. "If we die with honor," he said simply. "But if anyone can trick this ancient enemy, it is you, little brother. Your mind sees patterns. Now we need that vision." Alara swallowed hard, touched by his confidence and terrified by the responsibility. "I'll do my best," she promised. Kthar nodded once. That is all any warrior can do. They pressed on, encountering increasingly desperate resistance from corrupted systems. Environmental controls went haywire, alternately freezing and overheating corridors. Gravity fluctuated wildly. Security barriers activated randomly, forcing them to find alternative routes or disable dangerous systems. Through it all, Kthar kept Alara safe, using his body as a shield when necessary and his weapons when unavoidable. For her part, Alara navigated them through the technological maze, using her tablet to detect safe paths and bypass corrupted systems. They worked together with an efficiency that surprised them both. Kthar's strength and combat skills complemented Alara's technical knowledge and problem-solving abilities. What one couldn't handle, the other could. Finally, they reached the antechamber to the central core, a massive circular room lined with processing units, all pulsing with an eerie light that didn't match their normal operation patterns. "There," Alara pointed to a main access terminal near the center of the room. "That's where I need to upload the lure." Kthar surveyed the space with a warrior's eye. Too easy. Trap waiting. As if triggered by his words, the antechamber's security systems activated. Defensive turrets emerged from hidden compartments, and maintenance robots converged from side corridors, all clearly controlled by the technophage. "Get to terminal," Kthar growled, drawing his weapons. "I hold them off." What followed was chaos. Kthar launched himself into battle against the mechanical guardians, a blur of controlled violence and tactical precision. Alara darted toward the terminal, dodging energy blasts and grasping mechanical arms as she went. Reaching the terminal, she connected her tablet and began the upload process for her quantum lure. The program was complex, requiring real-time adjustments as she observed how the technophage responded to initial probes. Behind her, the sounds of Kthar's battle grew more intense. A quick glance showed him surrounded by destroyed machines, but more kept coming. He was fighting with magnificent skill, but even a Varkon warrior had limits. "Hurry, little brother," he called, his voice strained with exertion. "Cannot hold forever." Alara worked frantically, fingers flying across her tablet as she refined the quantum patterns of her lure. The technophage was adapting, attempting to counter her program, but she had anticipated this. Each counter-adaptation triggered a new layer of her trap, drawing the entity deeper into her logical maze. Just as she prepared to activate the final sequence, a security drone broke through Kthar's defense and launched itself directly at her. She had no time to dodge. Kthar roared, abandoning his position to intercept the drone. He caught it mid-air, the impact driving him to one knee, but he held it away from Alara long enough for her to complete the upload. "Now," she shouted, activating the quantum lure. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The eerie, pulsing lights throughout the antechamber flickered erratically, then began to flow, like a fluid being drained, toward a secondary system Alara had designated as the trap. The attacking drones froze, then collapsed inert to the floor. For a moment, there was silence except for Kthar's heavy breathing. Then Custodian's voice came through, clear again though somewhat subdued. "Technophage. Contained. Isolated in quarantine system. Station functions restoring. Threat. Neutralized through methods defying standard logical analysis." "Most interesting." Alara sagged against the terminal, exhaustion finally catching up to her. Kthar approached, looking somewhat worse for wear, but his yellow eyes bright with something that might have been pride. "Well fought, little brother," he said, gently placing one massive hand on her shoulder. "A victory worthy of song." Alara managed a tired smile. "We did it together. I couldn't have reached the core without you." "True," Kthar agreed, with typical Varkon bluntness. Good partnership. Your mind. My strength. He paused, then added more softly, the way it should be between warriors. They made their way back through the station, which was already beginning to recover from the technophage attack. Systems rebooted, lights stabilized, and corrupted drones were being rounded up for reprogramming. News of their success had somehow preceded them, and they found themselves the center of attention wherever they went. By the time they reached the council chamber, Alara was practically asleep on her feet. Kthar, noticing her exhaustion, simply picked her up with surprising gentleness and carried her the rest of the way, ignoring the startled looks from other station inhabitants. The council, hastily reassembled, greeted them with a mixture of relief, gratitude, and no small amount of awe. Even the most dismissive representatives now looked at Alara, tiny human though she was, with new respect. Kthar set her down carefully for the formal acknowledgement of their achievement, but remained protectively close. When the silicoid representative suggested that the technophage threat had been exaggerated, Kthar's growl silenced any further debate. "Little brother saved your crystalline structures," he rumbled. "Show respect, or I will use them for target practice." No one doubted he meant it. In the days that followed, Concordia Prime returned to normal operations, though with heightened security around ancient artifacts and more stringent containment protocols. The technophage remained safely trapped in Alara's quantum logic maze, where xenotechnology specialists could study it without risk of another outbreak. Alara found herself suddenly elevated from overlooked researcher to respected expert. She was offered a permanent position on the station, with resources for her work that exceeded anything she could have hoped for on Earth. Species that had once barely acknowledged her existence now sought her insight on various technical and theoretical problems. But the most profound change was in her relationship with Kthar. The Varkon warrior had appointed himself her permanent protector and advocate, a role he took as seriously as any battle assignment. He began spending time in her laboratory, listening as she explained her theories, occasionally offering surprisingly insightful comments from a warrior's perspective. In turn, she learned more about Varkon culture and history from him than had ever been recorded in human databases. Behind his fearsome exterior and terse manner lay a complex honor code and a surprising appreciation for what he called battle wisdom, the ability to see beyond the obvious and find unexpected solutions. 2 months after the technophage incident, Alara sat in the station's observation dome, watching a newly discovered nebula through the massive viewport. Kthar sat beside her, his massive form making the standard-sized bench creak ominously. "Your old tablet," he said suddenly, pointing to the device she still carried everywhere. "It survived technophage. Impressive technology." Alara smiled, patting the worn case affectionately. "It's not the technology that's impressive. It's quite outdated, actually, but I've modified it extensively over the years. Sometimes the oldest tools are the most reliable." Kthar nodded appreciatively. "Like Varkon battle knife. Simple, reliable." He hesitated, then reached into a compartment in his armor and withdrew a small object. "For little brother. For protection." He handed her what appeared to be a scaled-down version of a Varkon combat communicator, reimagined to fit comfortably in a human hand. The device was made of a strange, mottled metal that seemed to absorb and redirect light. "Varkon alloy," he explained. "For tablet case. Stronger than any human metal. Will protect your battle wisdom." Alara turned the custom-made case over in her hands, touched beyond words by the gift. For a Varkon warrior to share their precious metals, apparently a significant cultural taboo, from what she'd gathered, was an honor almost unheard of. "Thank you," she said simply, knowing Kthar would prefer directness to effusive gratitude. He nodded once, seemingly satisfied. Good partnership. Unexpected, but good. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the nebula's shifting colors. Eventually, Kthar spoke again, his voice thoughtful. "When I first saw you, so small, so fragile, I thought, useless creature, waste of space." He glanced down at her, yellow eyes gleaming. "Was wrong. Size means nothing. True strength here. He tapped his head, and here, he tapped his chest over his heart. You have both. Small package. Big warrior. Alara smiled up at her unlikely friend and protector. And you're not quite the mindless brute everyone thinks you are you? Thar made the rumbling sound she now recognized as Varkon laughter. Do not tell others. Ruin's fearsome reputation. Word of the unusual friendship between the enormous Varkon warrior and the tiny human scientist spread throughout Concordia Prime and beyond. Some found it amusing, others touching, and a few were made distinctly uncomfortable by the alliance between such disparate beings. But no one who witnessed them together could deny the genuine respect and affection that had grown between them. In the grand observation dome of Concordia Prime, beneath the spectacular vista of stars and swirling nebulae, an unlikely brotherhood had formed, one that would change perceptions throughout the galaxy and open doors between species long suspicious of one another. Thar placed a massive hand carefully on Alara's shoulder, its weight substantial but comforting. Many more crazy things out there to explore, yes, little brother? Alara grinned up at him. Absolutely, big brother. Absolutely.